All right, Eric, thank you. Developing right now, community leaders and activists are calling for all Memphis police officers who they say abuse their power during this No Kings Day protest to be fired, along with other demands. Action News 5's Michaela Redmond joining us live outside City Hall about the demands they're bringing. Michaela, to Memphis City Council members. Tell us more.
Joy, the group held a press conference before heading inside for that city council meeting that started at 4 p.m. They shared a list of demands for Memphis Mayor Paul Young, Police Chief C.J. Davis, and the city council. You may remember that protest took place back on March 28th. Now, 3 people were arrested and 4 MPD officers were placed on administrative leave. The protest ended with officers using pepper spray, and police claim protesters marched without a permit and blocked traffic, resulting in disorderly conduct. Organizers, on the other hand, say the protest was peaceful and about to end when officers acted violently, abused and misused their power. Along with the firing of all officers who they say abused their power, they're also looking for the release of the officers' disciplinary records, the release of all body cam and surveillance video from that day, and a hearing to get to the bottom of exactly what happened.
An officer grabbed me from behind. I immediately and repeatedly stated that I was not resisting arrest, and I gave him my other arm, but I was dragged around and taken to the ground anyway. As they carried me to their vehicles, one of them had me by the collar somehow, and I was choking. I did my best to let them know, and I know that I was heard because one of them responded, "No, you're not."
What we witnessed from the police department was a disproportionate, irrational use of force that simply did not match the situation.
Before heading into the meeting, the group said they do have people signed up to speak, and they will share their concerns and demands with city council members. They also say they will continue pushing for accountability even after tonight's meeting. For now, reporting live outside Memphis City Hall, Michaela Redmond, Action News 5.
The 3 men arrested in the No Kings Day protest will be back in court April 27th. Here they are. Adam Nelson, Reuben Birch, and David Rahame face several charges, each including disorderly conduct, resisting detention, and obstructing passage. Community donations paid their bonds.